What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Somewhat Sports Podcast. My name is Chris. I am joined by legends in the making, Damien and Jurg. Guys, how are you today?
As always, I am excited. Thursday has been, kind of bland and boring to this point, but as always, this show is here to pick us up. I'm ready. We got a big one. Let's go, boys.
Dame?
I'm doing good. I'm just a little hungry, but I'm excited to do this podcast today.
That's nice. Should get some food after this.
I am, actually.
Nice. Grubbing
Don't ask
hard.
me what it is because I'm not telling you what it is.
I know you're not going to tell me. That's why I didn't ask. But, like Jurg said, pretty big week. Not really. We're just milking it, of course. And, that's what we do, basically. We just milk news here to have something to talk about. But, anyways, we are going to have a star-studded week because not necessarily news. Well, half news and half of it is discussion based. We will be discussing the NFL's schedule release. That's right. All 32 team schedules got released yesterday. This will be released on Friday, and I believe it got released on Wednesday, right, Jurg?
Yep.
Yeah, but we're recording on Thursday, so yeah. And then we're going to cap it off with our NBA awards. That's right, end of the season NBA awards. The season will be ending soon. I believe, what's today? I believe next week it's over, right? Yeah, so we'll be giving out our NBA individual end of the season awards, and then we'll be ranking, and then we'll be naming our all NBA teams. So yeah, that's pretty much what we got this week. Now, in true fashion, we're going to start off with the NFL. So, as I said, schedules were released, thoughts were made up. Some teams got the short end of the stick. Other teams seem like they're going to do well. But all in all, I do want to say this. I'm pretty excited for the upcoming NFL season, man. There's a lot of games that we're going to look forward to, a lot of matchups. I think the national TV schedule looks pretty decent from what I saw. I want to get you guys' thoughts on that. But when it comes to schedules, we're going to be discussing who we thought has the most difficult schedule, who we think has the most easy schedule, teams that might surprise us based on, their mediumness of the schedule, if that makes any sense. And then teams that might slip down that are considered good, but because there's the difficulty of their schedule, they might drop out. Kind of all over the place, but that's what we're going to talk about. First question. What are your thoughts on the upcoming NFL season based on the schedule release yesterday? Jurg, I want to start with you.
I think for the most part, at least on paper, the NFL's done a pretty good job in terms of a lot of the non-conference games that we're going to see. Of course, we're going to see the usual, games on a weekly basis where it's two teams that weren't that great last season and may not be as good this season that are going to face off, but there are a lot of good out of conference games between teams that could be competitive. I think right off the bat, Kansas City is going up against Green Bay in one of these games. They're going to have Kansas City and Dallas, which just the money off of ad revenue on that game alone is going to be wild for the league. And then you have teams that, could have a breakout season this year, like the Washington football team. They're going to, tangle with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Buffalo Bills. Like, just so many good games. But I think, at least for me, the biggest surprise of everything I've seen, the Thursday night football schedule on paper this season actually doesn't look that bad. Thursday night for a long time now has been criticized. Not only is it because, it kind of can contribute more to players getting hurt on a constant basis, but in all seriousness, like, aside from that, it's also garbage games usually. You have like the third seed in the AFC West against like the fourth seed in the NFC South going at it. It's almost never quality games right off the bat. But I look at some of the big games on this schedule. You got Dallas versus Tampa Bay to open up the season. Giants and Washington in week 2. It's good to get that one out early because both teams still have hope for the beginning of the year. And then interesting games. Week 5, it'll be the Rams and the Seahawks. Week 8, if Aaron Rodgers is still a Packer, it'll be Rodgers versus Murray. Baltimore versus Miami in week 10. You got week 12, Buffalo against the Saints, depending on how good the Saints are. Kansas City against the Chargers in week 15. That's Mahomes against Herbert. Like, on paper, there are actually some pretty good, like, could be competitive games this year on Thursday nights. And just off of that alone, you have to give them a W of some sort for the schedule release, because the fact that they, at least for myself, because I've been a massive critic of Thursday night football the last few years, the fact that they actually make me want to consider watching it more now, that's pretty big ups to the NFL.
Yeah, absolutely. Dame? Anything that caught your eye based on the schedule?
Honestly, the biggest thing that caught my eye was the two week one matchups actually. Of everything. The first one is the opening Thursday night game with the Cowboys and Bucks. I think that's the perfect way to start the season. Obviously, the Cowboys are the most polarizing team in football. You have the Bucks coming off the championship. You have Dak Prescott coming back. Like, I think that's the perfect way to really start the season instead of always starting the Cowboys with the Giants. Like, we're sick and tired of that. Like, we don't care. And the other one is the Jets versus the Panthers. I also think that was brilliant to start that week one because they're going to play each other regardless. But if you put it at the end of the year, like, well, if Zach Wilson sucks or Sam Darnold sucks, like, it's not going to be as interesting. But if you put a
Or if
week
they're
one,
hurt.
like, yeah, exactly. If you put a week one, like, you both get you get their first games with their new teams, like, it's perfect. So those two really stood out to me.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the week one schedule. Damien already announced that we have the Cowboys and the Bucks, and I agree that that's a perfect way to start off the season. A lot of storylines in that game, but I'm looking at some of the games here. Obviously, there's going to be games in which there's little care factor, but Seahawks versus Colts, I think that's a pretty dope matchup. Um, Jaguars versus Texans. I mean, those are two mediocre teams, but I think it'll give us like a first taste of like Trevor Lawrence. And I think he's probably going to go off against the Texans, to be honest. And again, we don't know. Is there like there's uncertainty about if Deshaun Watson is going to play this upcoming season, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it
So yeah, we don't know, but the Texans are I don't know. But we also got Eagles versus Falcons. I understand those are two teams that are kind of but I feel like with the addition of Devontae Smith and Kyle Pitts. It's gonna be a fun matchup. Steelers versus Bills looks decent. I'm trying to look here. Yeah, Jets versus Panthers, like we said. Sam Darnold against the Jets. That'll be cool. Cardinals versus Titans. I get like the Cardinals. I think are going to be very surprising this season. I think they have a playoff run ahead of them. And then Patriots, Dolphins, Browns versus Chiefs, like Packers versus Saints. I don't know how the Saints are going to be. And then
that game could be the game of two teams losing their Hall of Famers if Green Bay ends
true,
up having to trade
true.
Rodgers. So
So very exciting first week, and like Jurg said, the national TV schedule is looking A1. But moving on from that, now I want to get you guys' takes here. Jurg, I want to start off with you. Who has the most difficult schedule in your eyes? Who are two teams you think are going to struggle based on their schedule?
well, I think two teams right off the bat that I'm going to key in on, and it'll also heavily because you know for this is called foreshadowing. Weeks, maybe a month or two from now, we're gonna do our NFL preseason projections. Obviously, where we're gonna predict our division winners, our wild card teams, etc. Stuff like that. Like, well, big things coming in somewhat sports. It's gonna be a somewhat sports summer, for
Jeez.
2021.
Sheesh.
So, we got big plans coming up. So these are two teams that I'm going to keep a heavy eye on depending on how the offseason goes in terms of do anything I hear about them change? Do they maybe lose a player due to injury? Stuff like that. And that will be the Seattle Seahawks and the Minnesota Vikings. So first off with Seattle, I've said it a number of times on a number of different platforms. I am not as big of a fan of Seattle going into this season as I am in years past. I really do think from a chemistry basis, what happened with Russell Wilson and the team during the offseason, I think that may affect things more than people are going to give credit for, especially as the season, now 17 games, mind you, wears on. So why is their schedule tough? Well, going into it, if you go just based off of strength of schedule from last season, they're tied for 10th/11th place for the toughest schedule. So who are some of the notable teams? And again, we're going off of who was good enough last season, right? So on their schedule this year, it's the Indianapolis Colts, the Tennessee Titans. Of course, they have their entire division two times each, and that's never going to be easy. When you consider it's San Fran, it's the Rams, and it's the Cardinals. You have the Green Bay Packers, which, assuming Rodgers is still there, then he always does well against Seattle. You have the Washington football team, who that defense is going to be stout. And when you consider them having arguably the best front four in all of football versus one of the weaker offensive lines, I know they made one or two additions, but that's not enough to go up against Chase Young, Montez Sweat, Allen, Payne. So Washington, that's going to be a game to see how much Russell Wilson's going to have to run. And then this team is very up or down, but again, I'm just basing it off of what the defensive front can do. If Khalil Mack and Roquan Smith can become game wreckers, and Justin Fields will likely be starting by then, who knows what that Chicago game could become, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're talking about depth of weapons, Washington, oh my lord. Chicago has some pretty good weapons that Justin Fields can play with early on in his career. So you have that, and like I said, offensive line issues. The defense took some steps back in the offseason. Bobby Wagner's the only guy on that defense, and Jamal Adams, excuse me. So the two of them are the only two players that I really trust to lead things defensively for them. And I think it takes more than two players to help out when it's 11 starters there. So that's my concern with Seattle. I think it's going to be a little tough for them. Also tough for a team that they are going to face this season, and it'll all depend on how they're both going into that matchup. The Minnesota Vikings. So the Vikings have the fifth hardest schedule going into this year, just based off of opposing teams' combined win percentage from last year. And you just look at the schedule. Now, they have to face Green Bay twice, which is tough. So, again, dealing with Aaron Rodgers twice a year is not something that defensive coordinators like to deal with. But then you look at the rest of the schedule. It's either going to be, and again, it's all based upon how teams are, but it's either a difficult opponent or a pretty talented quarterback that they're going to have to go up against. So yeah, you have games against like the Cincinnati Bengals and the Carolina Panthers that on paper you're not going to worry about so much. But again, Joe Burrow is talented. Sam Darnold, potentially, that game is going to be a few weeks into the season. We'll see how him and Matt Rule are doing come then. And DJ Moore is a very nice weapon. And of course, Christian McCaffrey, if he's healthy. But even going past those two teams, you deal with the Arizona Cardinals, you deal with the Los Angeles Rams, and you deal with the 49ers because the NFC West and the NFC North are duking it out this season in terms of schedule. The Seattle Seahawks are there. Again, it's a flip of the coin on which one of these teams is going to be good or bad come that game. And then the rest of it, they deal with Cleveland, they deal with Dallas, they deal with Baltimore. They face the Los Angeles Chargers. Justin Herbert can throw on just about anyone, it feels like. So he could have a good game, especially if his weapons are healthy. And I forget which one of us did. The Chargers were a winner for one of us last week in our NFL draft review. So you have that. And then Pittsburgh, again, all depending, but they have a plethora of weapons that they could throw at the Vikings defense. And Najee Harris, if that team has some momentum, if the offensive line overperforms, he could run all over that Vikings defense. It is not an easy schedule for a Minnesota Vikings team, which, spoiler alert, Mike Zimmer, this is going to be a really big year, depending on if he's still going to be there or not, because last season was a disappointment, and if they can't get it together this year, let's just say he's not going to be the coach for much longer there.
I think solid picks there, Jurg. I think I made a chart identifying the difficulties, the mediums, and the easies in terms of the schedules. And I think for the difficult schedules, I definitely had the Vikings, and I had the Seahawks in the middle of medium and difficult. But yeah, I think that you make solid points. For me, though, for my difficult schedules, I have the Tennessee Titans to start off, actually. So the Tennessee Titans are a solid team. They did lose Corey Davis, so I'm going to take that into account. I'm looking at their schedule now. They play the Arizona Cardinals, their first game. I think the Cardinals have, extremely improved in the offseason. I think notable additions, J.J. Watt. I think they fixed their defense. Yeah, and the Cardinals, I feel like, could make a playoff run this year, as I said earlier. So I feel like they're going to be one of those, tricky teams to kind of get through, and I think they've shown improvement over the last two seasons. I think the Kyler Murray era has really catapulted them into a team to not, overlook. So, yeah, you got the Cardinals the first week, then you play the Seahawks. Jurg, I completely agree with your gripes, but at the end of the day, the Seahawks are still a top-tier team, in my opinion. They always flirt of, like, first-round playoff exit or, like, Super Bowl contender-ish. They're, like, in that echelon, I feel like, in the middle, right? They not necessarily bad enough to miss the playoffs, but they're not necessarily good enough to, get over that hump to get to the championship round.
Mm-hmm.
But irregardless, Russell Wilson is still Russell Wilson. You have Tyler Lockett, you have DK Metcalf. Yeah, their O-line's a little sus, but the Seahawks are still the Seahawks, and I feel like, with Pete Carroll, they're always going to be one of those, they're like the Spurs of the NFL, in my opinion. And then they play the Colts. The Colts, I feel, are going to be a dangerous team now with Carson Wentz leading the pack, and it's probably one of, if not the best O-line in the NFL. So there's that. And then I think the schedule gets a bit easier the next 2 weeks for them. But they play the Jets and the Jaguars. I think both of those teams have improved, especially the Jets, bias aside. I do think they loaded up with weapons this offseason, and of course they drafted Zach Wilson. And the Jets, I think, were purposely tanking last season as well. I think this year is going to be the first season to take seriously for them. So, and the Jaguars, of course, you add Trevor Lawrence. You had a bunch of draft picks that is immediately going to be, catapulted into their offensive schemes. So while those, I think those are teams that they could beat, I don't think it'll be a breeze. And then after that, we got the Bills, the Chiefs, the Colts again, the Rams. So there you go, 4 teams right there. The Rams are going to be like a heavyweight favorite in my opinion, especially with the addition of Matt Stafford. I think Rams are going to be a top tier team. But there you go. I mean, Chiefs speak for itself. The Bills, Josh Allen leading the charge, and then another Colts matchup. And then you play the Saints. I don't necessarily know how the Saints are going to be without Drew Brees. I don't know who their quarterback's going to be. I think it's going to be between Winston and Taysom Hill. But again, you still have weapons over there like Michael Thomas, and then of course you play the Texans, the Patriots, the Jags. The Patriots, I feel like, are interesting because they're the kind of wild card in my opinion. I don't know about you guys. I know they made some really good moves this offseason, so I think they're going to be better than last year. But again, I do think the Titans are still good enough to compete with them because I don't think the Patriots went too above and beyond with their additions. But then you got then I think with the last 3 games, you got the 49ers. I think with the 49ers healthy are one of the top tier teams. And of course, with the addition of Trey Lance, they have options now at the quarterback position. They have options at a position in which kind of like that held them back essentially. I mean, because Jimmy Garoppolo has been a little underwhelming. I don't necessarily know how they're going to be without Robert Saleh this year, but I think they'll be fine. Then you got the Dolphins. I think with Will Fuller and then Jalen Waddle, they made a lot of additions to their offense this year. So I think the Dolphins are going to be really tricky. And I think Tua is going to have the official keys now. So they're going to be one of the top 2 teams in my opinion as they take like a step forward. They missed the playoffs last season, right? The Dolphins?
Yeah, but just barely. It was the
Barely,
final
yeah.
game of the regular season that
Yeah, so
eliminated
I
them.
think they're definitely going to be good enough to make the play. All right, spoiler alert, I have them making the playoffs next season, but they're going to be a really good team in my opinion. So they're not going to be a team that I mean, props to them, man. What an improvement from like 2 seasons ago when players wanted out to like now to being a team that teams don't want to see essentially. And then the Titans finish off with the Texans. So yeah, there's a plethora of teams in which the Titans are good enough to compete with and like win against, but I'm looking at some of the top tier teams that they play against. Dolphins, Niners, Steelers. I say that very loosely. Um, Saints. Say that loosely. Rams, Colts, Chiefs, Bills, Seahawks, Colts again, and then Cardinals. Right there. Those are 11 games that are going to be a little tricky. I'm not taking anything away from the Titans, but I'm just saying those are, in my opinion, the majority of the schedule are against opponents that are either somewhat good to like really good. So that's my first team. And the second team, I'll have the Colts. Starting off, Seahawks, Rams, Titans, Dolphins, Ravens. That's their first 5 games right there. I think the Ravens improved, and I think the addition of Rashad Bateman, I think that gives another dynamic to their offense. Dolphins already said I've been drooling over them the last 5 minutes. Rams again, heavyweight favorite. Seahawks are Seahawks, and then I didn't talk about the Titans because they were my first team, but I do think the Titans are still good. After those 5 games, you face the Texans, that's a W, but then you go against the 49ers, the Titans again, and then you have a little 2-week streak of just the Jets and the Jaguars. Why is that like every team is getting the Jets and the Jaguars back to back? Yeah, and then you got the Bills, the Bucks, the Texans again, the Patriots, then the Cardinals, then the Raiders, and then the Jaguars. So I think the start of their season is kind of abysmal. I don't want to take anything away from them because I do think they're going to be a lot better, the Colts, especially with the addition of Carson Wentz. And I think they re-signed T.Y. Hilton, and so I think they'll be good essentially. But I feel like the beginning of the season is kind of like crucial to some teams because like the start of it, you don't want, if you like fall back too down and like it's basically an uphill battle if like you fall down early in the standings early on, and then like you want to like try and scrap and claw, but especially with your players being fatigued a bit towards the end of the season. So I don't think they want to be in a position like that. I'm not taking anything away from these teams because I think these are 2 solid-ass teams, to be honest, but I just think they're going to be in a dogfight with a majority of like these teams that they play. Yeah, so again, I could be dead wrong. These teams could essentially like be in the 8 to 9 win range or 10 range, 8 to 10 win range. So I could easily eat my words, but just based off the schedule I see, teams that performed last season, but also teams that have made offseason additions that were not necessarily good teams that have kind of moved into the echelon of, okay, we're not that bad teams. Yeah, I just see like a bunch of like war zone type of games for these teams. So yeah, that's essentially what I got to say. Dame, what you got, man?
So the two teams I have, the first one is the Bears. Um, I actually don't think they're gonna be that good. That's first of all, but their schedule is pretty rough too. They play the AFC North, which is a very good division with the Ravens, the Browns, the Bengals are improved, and the Steelers are what they are. They also play San Fran. They play Tampa, Green Bay. They play the Rams to start off the season. Obviously, they play Green Bay twice. They play in that division. So overall, just a really tough schedule for them. Play Seattle as well, Arizona. I see. So just them not being that good of a team and transitioning with that rookie quarterback, like I see as a really tough schedule for them. The second team is actually I mentioned them, the Steelers. With the Steelers, they play obviously the NFC North, which is a tough division with the Packers. Playing the Packers twice, but then they see the Kansas City Chiefs. They obviously play the Ravens twice. They play the Chargers, play the Browns twice. They also play Seattle as their extra game, that 17th game, the extra game.
Yeesh.
So that's a really tough schedule there. And of course, I same thing as the Bears. I take this into account when I did the easier and hardest schedules. I take into account like how good I think the team actually is. And I don't think the Steelers are going to be good this year, so I took that into account. And with them playing in a tough division, playing in the against the conference against the NFC North, which is also a tough division, and you add in Seattle as your extra game, like overall, I just think those two have a really tough schedule going into this season.
Okay. All right. Jurg, you have anything to add to our teams?
No, I think you guys made good picks everywhere. I think Chicago, it's a transition year, and like, I mean, I saw their schedule for a moment before, but I didn't even realize the murderer's row of teams they got to deal with. So there's that. Pittsburgh. It really all depends on if Ben finally falls off, and then I think with your point, Chris, while Tennessee and Indy, the division still belongs to one of those two. One of them is going to take a step back this season because they both kind of they missed on a player or two at certain spots that really could have helped them. And I think one of them is going to take a drastic fall off. It's just going to all depend on which team does.
I personally think it'll be the Colts. I think I don't know actually. No, it might be the Titans because I do think Carson Wentz is a big addition to them, to their team. I think they're gonna be like the Colts. I think could have they lost to the Bills the first round, right? Last
Yeah,
season in the
yeah, but
playoffs,
just barely. They were like a
just
throw or
barely.
two away.
Exactly, and I think there's a big gap between Philip Rivers and Carson Wentz. But the problem would be getting there. So who knows? All right, so we transition to the easy part of the schedules now. Start off with Jurg. Dame, let me start off with you. Who are two teams that you think are gonna have an easy schedule?
So maybe I took the easy way out, but like I said, I mentioned like how good I think the teams are and how bad they are with the easy schedule. My two are the Buccaneers and the Chiefs.
Okay.
The well, a big reason is because they both play the opposite conference. They both play against the easiest division. The Bucks play against the AFC East. It's Tom Brady again, just feasting on the AFC East like he has for the past 20 years. And their extra game is against the Colts, who like you don't know what you're gonna get with the Colts this season. So that's easy right there. And then the Chiefs, you have the NFC East, which we all know is god awful. We don't know who's going to win that division. We don't know who's going to be good. So the Chiefs, like they need any more help. They play the NFC East, and their extra game is against Green Bay, which is obviously tough. But that just
Who
because
knows?
they get to play the NFC East, that kind of bounces out. And like you said, who knows with Green Bay? Like, who knows if Aaron Rodgers is going to be there? Who knows how they're going to be? So obviously, two Super Bowl teams, but I think they overall do have the easiest schedules going forward.
All right, Dame. I guess I'll allow that cop out answer. But so I for easy schedule, so I'm kind of indifferent here. Again, most polarizing team. I'm going to start off with the Cowboys. I'm looking at the schedule now, so the Cowboys could either be really good or like middle of the pack. Their roster on paper, it should translate to okay, this is going to be a top tier team, but it's the Cowboys. But you never know. They did improve their defense ultimately, but their cornerback position is still gapped. But with the addition of Micah Parsons, I'm not going to give them too much of a fault. But looking at their schedule now, they start off with the Bucks. I you know what? I don't want to give that fully to the Bucks right away. I understand a lot of people have like the Bucks winning this matchup, but I don't know. I feel like it's a winnable game for the Cowboys as well. It could go either way. I'm leaning towards the Bucks to win it, but I don't want to count out the Cowboys. Again, we don't know how Dak Prescott is going to be. Of course, that we need to take that into account. And then after that, we have the Chargers. The Chargers are going to be like a sneaky dark horse team. So again, these are 2 games to go either way. I'll lean towards the Cowboys. I'll be nice about it. Then you got the Eagles, then the Panthers, then the Giants. Giants have improved, but I still do have the Cowboys beating them. And then the Patriots, winnable game, but Patriots could be sneaky. Vikings, Broncos, Falcons. Then you go against the big boy Chiefs, but then you go against the Raiders, and then the Saints, a Washington football team, then the Giants, Washington again, Cardinals, and the Eagles. Now, I do think the Cowboys, I think both of you could agree, I think the Cowboys benefit from being in the NFC East, right? And then
Yeah.
so you obviously play those teams definitely to their advantage, right? And then you have the sneaky games, of course, like the Bucks, and then the Panthers, and then the Cardinals. That I think those games where you play against like good teams but not like top tier teams, those will determine your season, especially for the Cowboys. I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt because I do think they're going to be better this season. I really hope Dak Prescott is well and healthy. Yeah. Again, it is the Cowboys, so go either way here, but I have them in an easy schedule because, like I said, there's like 2 top tier teams, and then there's the good teams, and then there's uh beatable teams. So
Right.
I got the Cowboys for that. For my second team, I got the Buffalo Bills. That's right. So the Buffalo Bills, AFC Championship game they won to last season, correct, Jurg?
Yep.
All right, I appreciate you clarifying that for me. All right, they play the Steelers, and then the Dolphins the first 2 weeks. I think those are the 2 of the toughest. Excuse me, some of the toughest teams they play, but I do think they could beat both. But it'll be scrappy. Then you got Washington Texans, Big Boy Chiefs, then the Titans. I already explained my thing with the Titans. Dolphins again, Jaguars, Jets, Colts, Saints, Patriots, Bucks, Panthers, Patriots again, Falcons, and then Jets. So yeah, initially when I saw it, I thought it was easy. Now that I'm rereading it, it's not as easy as I thought. But I do think these are teams that, again, a lot of these teams are wild cards to me. Like I know the Patriots are better, but I don't know if they're gonna be
Right.
like good. You know what I mean?
We need to see it with some of these teams. Like
Yeah.
we can only go off of last season and then just try to project how some of these acquisitions will do. But we don't like I said earlier, we don't know who's going to get hurt. Like 1 or 2 of these guys that we're thinking of that will play a key role, they may go down in the preseason due to an injury.
Yeah, I agree. So yeah, I don't. I mean, if there's backlash towards my pick right now, please. So again, we don't know the Patriots going to be. Same thing with the Saints. I know the Saints have decent weapons, but again, that quarterback position is a big question mark. Excuse me. I think with the Dolphins, I project the Dolphins to be good, but it is the Bills that we're talking about, and I know they're in the same division, but until you could show me something like this is going to be, I think Tua's first season with legitimate weapons and his first season with the keys,
Yeah.
in his hands. So I'm pulling for him because I think Tua's a good dude. He looks like a good dude. So I'm pulling for him, but it's uncertain because the weapons are there. Everything is in place for him. I just need to see it executed. So we'll have a better perspective of how things go. But then again, I mean, you look at the teams now, and Jurg, like you said, the Steelers could be a hit or miss.
Yeah.
I understand the addition of Najee Harris, and you have Chase Claypool and Juju's re-signed, but the Steelers are a bit of frauds to me. They're like the Milwaukee Bucks a little bit of the NFL. But you got the Steelers, Washington. I get it; they're really good defensively, but I do think they are below the Bills. They play the Texans, they play the Jaguars, they play the Jets twice, they play the Patriots twice, they play the Panthers. And while I like the Panthers, still again an uncertain team. Then you got the Falcons. And then, of course, then you have your Chiefs and your Bucks. But overall, I'm leaning towards easy. At first, it was in the line of that was between medium and easy, but I'll essentially move it to easy because I do think the Bills are a top tier team. Jurg, before you go on to your easy teams, what do you think about me and Dame's picks?
I definitely think, again, you guys have pretty solid picks for the most part, especially when you go with a NFC East team. It's not bad because of the easiest schedules for next season, just based off of win percentages from the year before. The Eagles have the easiest. The Cowboys are second easiest. The Giants are a few spots away at number 8. And I think the football team they're closer to the middle of the pack. So overall, like in terms of what division has the easiest schedule, it's the NFC East because they were so bad last season. So definitely can't blame it for adding one of them. And also, like, you guys are taking talent into impact as well. Like these team schedules, like, it may seem hard to some, but when you consider the talent that these squads have, like it's Josh Allen, it's Brady, it's Mahomes, it's Dak. Those four guys can help win you games now. So it it's a different level. Like, you can add to the easiness when you consider who the quarterback is. So, moving on from that, I'm going with two teams that, their schedules aren't too bad. And, maybe to some people, they may question this, but I have my reasons. And again, just going based off of the win percentage of your opposing teams, I'm going to go first with the team that is tied for 27th in opponents' win percentage. So very low win percentage for the opposing teams that they're facing from the year prior are the Miami Dolphins, funny enough. I think aside from their two games against the Bills, their Tampa Bay game and their Baltimore Ravens game, a lot of the games throughout the schedule are against teams that I think they'll outright beat, or again, as we've mentioned, hit or miss teams. When you face teams like the Raiders on your schedule, while Jacksonville has improved, they're not there yet. And here's my thing: while the Jets are improved, they're not going to be anywhere near winless like they were last year, so late into the year. But they're still another year away. While they added pieces, there needs to be a lot of development. While I think Robert Saleh was a great hire, there needs to be some time there. So that's why I would still give the Dolphins the edge over them. And then they're going to face the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons are probably going to take like a 10-point lead into the fourth and then lose it by 21 because that's just what they do. They face Houston. Enough said. They face the Giants. Enough said. They face the Carolina Panthers. It could be a good little back and forth affair between Darnold and Tua facing off. But again, like you mentioned it, Chris, Tua should take leaps this year, and considering the weapons he's going to have, my thing is this: if they let him uncork the ball a little bit and go deeper down the field compared to last season, I think this team becomes more dangerous because they have a couple guys that could just straight up outspeed anyone. But again, that's if
Yep.
they're going to let him throw the ball down the field. If they're going to play conservative, then that it's just going to be a waste of what that offense can do, my opinion personally. Because Chan Gailey, in this current NFL, if he was your offensive coordinator last year, only the best of the best quarterbacks would have been able to make that offense look good. I'm just saying. And so I think the Dolphins, I have them as my number two team behind the Bills in the AFC East. And while the Pats and the Jets are interesting, we need to see them both play, and the Jets need another year or two. My second team is the former defending NFC champions, the San Francisco 49ers. So
Mm.
tied for 19th on the schedule in terms of win percentage. You look at San Fran. You have to look outside of their division because we already know that division is going to be a bloodbath. But do not forget their starting quarterback, their starting defense, heck, even some of their second stringers at these positions were getting injured last year. Like,
Yeah.
it was not funny how much of this team was in the emergency room compared to on the football field or in the practice facility. Heck, they even got kicked out of their own home arena last year because of COVID. So there we go. You look at their schedule this year, you start off with Detroit and Philly as your first two games. Once again, need I say any more? Green Bay game all depends on who's going to be starting there. Seattle, like I've said, I think they're going to split between the two Seattle games, so you give them a win there. Arizona, again, similar thing. Rams, similar thing. So out of the 9 games I've said, they could be 6-3, maybe 7-2. So that's pretty good. And then other teams they're facing, again, the Colts are hit or miss. The Bears, they're going to have their struggles this season, especially if Jimmy G's healthy. Again, the Jags, talented quarterback, but they're a year away. Bengals, talented quarterback, but they still need some more pieces like a left tackle to make sure that Joe Burrow doesn't get his head caved in, or offensive line in general. Again, the Atlanta Falcons. Atlanta's going to take a 3-point lead into that fourth quarter, then lose by 20. They face the Tennessee Titans, who I'm not personally high on this season. And they face the Houston Texans second to last week. Again, Houston, need I say more, depending on what happens with Deshaun. And I wouldn't be shocked by the end of the year if Deshaun, if he was playing, if he's probably just going to hold out and want to leave that team. So at the end of the day, San Fran, if they're 100% healthy again this season, if that front four can become the game wreckers that they were back when they made the Super Bowl, San Fran can make another deep playoff run because Kyle Shanahan, for all the faults that you want to point out for him, he's still a pretty dang good coach. So I'm going with the 49ers.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Solid pick. Solid pick. Yeah, I also had two I I mean, we won't spend too much time on this, but two teams I have that could essentially again be a dark horse based on their schedule and based on the improvements they made this offseason that could possibly make noise. I think not too much noise, but I think some noise are the Los Angeles Chargers. We already know Justin Herbert. We already know how good he is, but I do think they made some key additions, whether it was from the draft, with the O line and just wide receivers and then tight ends just in general. So I think Justin Herbert's gonna have a lot of toys to play with. And then of course they juiced up the one thing that they needed to do. They juiced up the one thing that they needed to juice up, which was the O line, with the Rashawn Slater pick. Um, and then I think the other team I have that might be a surprise team is the Carolina Panthers. I think Sam Darnold, again, same situation. We're gonna see. I think it's the same situation as Tua, where he has a lot more weapons than he did with the Jets, of course, to say the least. He's in a stable environment, stable coaching staff. And I think again, these are two teams that have a pretty decent schedule. And I think with Christian McCaffrey as well for the Panthers, I think he was hurt for a majority of last season. So Darnold reunites with Robbie Anderson as well, and so I think both teams could make some noise. Where it might be like a Miami Dolphins type of year last season, where they were very close to making the playoffs, but they just weren't enough.
Right.
But I think those are two teams. Like again, I think the Chargers, their rebuilding process was accelerated once we saw how good Justin Herbert was. So yeah, I think the Panthers are always one quarterback away from being decent. So yeah, those are two teams. Before we move on, what do you guys think about those two teams possibly being those dark horse teams? Dame, let me start off with you.
I love the Panthers. Like, you see me in the chat. I love that they went for Sam Darnold. I love that he's in such a great situation with all these weapons and the coaching staff. Like, I just love that pick, and that's who I think is gonna really surprise a lot of people this year as well. Maybe not win the division because they're obviously with the Buccaneers,
Mhm.
but Sam Darnold's still really young. He's 23 years old. Like, they probably are best set up for the next 10 years at quarterback than anybody else in that division.
And what do you think of the Chargers?
The Chargers are just a good. Oh, sorry for cursing.
It's okay, bro.
The Chargers are just a really
Dame,
good
are you
team.
unfamiliar with this show? This
Yeah,
isn't this isn't the Bunsen Bruises podcast.
we
can
come
put
at
it
each
on
other
here.
literally every week, bro.
Yeah, go fuck yourself.
All right.
Anyway, the Chargers obviously added to where they needed to add with the offensive line, and Justin Herbert in the second year, he could either have that sophomore slump or he could really take that next step. And I'm betting on him taking that next step because he does have that protection now that he didn't have last year. He has a whole offseason now to really learn the playbook instead of really being thrown into the fire like he was last year. And that defense is just it's solid. It's not bad. It's not good, but the offense is going to be good enough for them to be a really good team.
Yeah, and they give in the games I've seen them against, like the Chiefs, for example, they give them problems. Like the
Yeah, they
Chiefs
really
had
do.
to they Chiefs win those games at the end with like a field goal. So
Yep.
who coughed while I was speaking?
Me.
Was that Dame?
Yep.
Yeah.
And
Anyway,
some more.
so yeah, hydrate yourself, thirsty cunt. All right, so Jurg, what do you think about those two teams before we move on?
I think those are both good picks. Second place in both their divisions are up for grabs because I don't see the Saints being that great of a team this year. And the AFC West in general, again, unless Rodgers gets sent to the Denver Broncos, the second seed is up for grabs. Both teams have, I think, again, I still think Darnold could be a good quarterback. You guys have already said it. Best coach he's ever going to have in his career up to this point, best weapons he's had in his career up to this point. And they just need to grow. They need a year or two. Again, like you said, Chris, I think they're a year or two away. I think they're going to be more the Cardinals this season, like
Yes,
last year,
yes.
where they have that stretch, but the inexperience is just going to show at some point because you think about it, a lot of the starters on the defense last year were rookies that were drafted in the 2020 draft by rule. And then he just got a potential number one corner in this past draft with J.C. Horn. And then offense, they need time to build. I think they're going to have their good games. I think one of the Tampa Bay games, I think they may give Tampa Bay like a close game through three quarters, like something like
Yeah.
that could happen. So the Panthers are just like a year or two away. Chargers, I think like the thing is they have a quarterback. They need to take advantage. They had to rebuild some of the weapons a little bit. I think there are some solid pieces there, at least with Allen and Eckler. And then defensively, if Bosa and Derwin James can be healthy for the whole year, that defense is going to they're going to increase their game to the next level. And with Staley being there, the job that he did with the Rams and how Ramsey and Aaron Donald always praise him, like they have a shot this year. Like the second seed easily in that division, like they should be the favorites.
Yeah. Yeah, I've completely forgot the Panthers got J.C. Horn with their first round pick, and they also got Terrence Marshall Jr., who I feel like could be a steal and an underrated weapon. But
He
yeah,
could be a
I
stud.
think
He could
yeah,
be
it
a
definitely
stud.
could be a stud. Yeah, and I think most of it depends on how Darnold's gonna do. So I think we've said all we could about our thoughts with the schedule releases.